Skylink Airways is aiming to be the first Sukhoi Superjet 100 operator in Africa. The airline hopes to start flying in September 2022. It's already started hiring former SAA personnel. The company was established by entrepreneur Clarence Andrea Steyn. Joining me now to unpack this is SA Flyer magazine editor, the Sky Leech. Guy, thank you for joining me. Just some credit to aerotime.aero, who published this particular article about Skylink Airways. What do we know about Skylink Airways, Guy?
Hi, Ulysses. Well, at this stage, not much beyond the Times article, I'm afraid. They've stayed very much under the radar, and they are giving themselves a year to launch. So I don't think that we can say that a new airline has arrived yet. It's not easy to start a new airline, particularly in the model that we're seeing from them, where they're talking about owning 5 of their own aircraft. And I have to say that Clarence Steyn's messages are very mixed at this stage as well. He's talking about the Sukhoi Superjet. However, that aeroplane in itself is very problematic, and in fact, what's happened around the world is that most airlines have simply stopped flying them because of lack of spare parts and maintenance and factory support and so on. It was originally launched nearly 10 years ago as a collaboration between Italy and Russia, and quite frankly, it just hasn't caught on and has now been overtaken by better products from Embraer and from Airbus, which was then Bombardier, the smaller aircraft there. The model also just doesn't make sense. They're talking about stepping into the gap left by SAA. Well, they're not going to do that with small aircraft like the Sukhoi Superjet or even the Embraers and the small Airbuses. They need long-haul aircraft if they're going to fly to Russia, which is what they're talking about. So there are huge gaps involved. And it's possible that they're talking about, or they're thinking about, becoming what we could call a virtual airline. The nearest we've seen to that in South Africa so far is Lift Airways, which has started by using another airline's operating license and aircraft. This is an airline called Global Airways. But that's not what we're hearing from Skylink. Skylink are trying to launch with a big splash, and I suspect that they're going to go the way of so many other airlines that have launched in South Africa. What
are they seeing in as far as the market is concerned, Guy, with the weaknesses that SAA faces at the moment? And SAA was a significant player in the South African market, but in terms of the domestic market, it could be argued, and I don't know this for a fact, but it could be argued that it was slowly, if not already, had been overtaken by the new players, the new entrants that were its competitors.
Very much so. SAA had pretty much given up on trying to compete in the local market, and that is why we've seen these somewhat desperate attempts to bail out Mango, because Mango is very much part of SAA's domestic market strategy. People are prepared to pay buy as cheap a flight as possible for even an hour 50 sector to Cape Town, and accept that they don't have all the full service offerings of a business class airline for these flights, which is why SAA launched Mango, and SAA still needs Mango for the domestic flights. At the same time, with Mango really struggling and uncertainty about whether it will be flying or not, for Fly Safair has done very well indeed. British Airways, Comair Kalula has got back into the market, and Lift is surviving, which is all credit to it. So there's very little space left in the South African domestic market for a new contender, especially one without a track record in flying aircraft that are significantly smaller and therefore have significantly higher costs than the aircraft that are being currently operated.
Lastly, Guy, are we to read anything into what appears, at least from what Skylink is saying, to be a preference for, those medium-range aircraft, such as the Superjet 100 and the Embraer that you're talking about? The Embraer has served Airlink quite well, hasn't it? What do we read into that vis-a-vis the aviation sector in a COVID world and post-COVID? Is the age of the A380s and the massive jets over?
Well, lots of questions there. Short, quick answer, is the age of the A380 over? Yes. These days, no airline needs to be operating four-engined aircraft, and that is one of the problems SAA is going to have with the restart, having been left with a fleet of obsolete four-engined A340s. What else does it tell us? Well, it tells us that they're probably able to get these Sukhoi Superjets incredibly cheaply, because, quite frankly, no one else wants them, and they're also already obsolete. It also says that they would probably want to try and compete on regional routes, and that means stepping into the gap left by SA Express rather than by SAA itself. However, it needs to be pointed out that Airlink, as you've already mentioned, Roger Foster, is an incredibly good competitor, and quite frankly, he's already taken up most of the space left by the end of Express. And finally, I think the big question in everyone's minds, including mine, because we don't know the answer, is how much longer the COVID crisis will continue. And the best guesses we have is that we're not going to see much relief, particularly for international travel, before the end of quarter four, the final quarter of this year. So it's extremely difficult to anticipate or predict whether there will be a market for a new contender like Skylink from the middle of next year.
All right. Thank you for your insights there. That's Guy Leach. He's the editor of SA Flyer magazine, weighing in there on, what's purported to be, or, is punted as a potential competitor in future for SAA. It's called Skylink Airways, and their preference for the Sukhoi Superjet 100. Let's see what happens in the coming months and years. They're saying they're launching in September 2022.